Every March, madness descends upon the college basketball universe when the NCAA tournaments unfold. While we always justifiably forever remember the champions who are etched into immortality, the best of the rest are seemingly relegated to the dustbin of history. But for so many unbelievable squads, that amounts to criminal negligence. For instance, when the 2015 Kentucky Wildcats men's basketball team was undefeated entering the Final Four, it was a foregone conclusion to so many, myself included, that they were gonna win it all. Until they didn't. Which Kevin McAllistered their Coach Cal. It raised the question to me of who the greatest non-champions of all time are, and where teams such as those 15 Cats would fall within that pantheon of the greatest men's college hoop squads to have ever come up short. And I wanted to apply hardcore science to find out. This episode is presented by the Accurate ADX, crafted for more. To have some uniformity, we'll only be going back to the 84-85 season because that's when the tourney first expanded to 64 teams. That larger field makes the arguments substantially more compelling and also captures the period where the strongest contenders reside anyway. My North Star in this endeavor will be the full season per game point differentials of every single Division I team. While not accounting for factors such as strength of schedule, it's still a great, pure way to assess a team's level of proficiency, certainly more so than, say, win percentage. To gather this heaping set of data with ultimate precision, I went to this website within StatHead, which provides the total points both scored and allowed by the well over 13,000 D1 team seasons played from the fall of '84 through the spring of '25. Following endless copy and pasting to a spreadsheet, I finally had consolidated all the pertinent team data I needed. After entering an extraordinarily complex formula, voila, I had all the per-game point differentials to form my y-axis. Another formula provides me with a single number to represent the season, reflected along the x-axis, and after some manual data reconciliations and corrections, a whole lot of abbreviating to make legible as many identities as possible, and some miscellaneous minutia, I was all set to construct this bad boy. The first observation that jumps out to me is, oh dear, I hope Jerry Rice hasn't been watching the hoops of his alma mater. Woof. My second observation is that 22 of the top 24 per-game point differentials here were accomplished by teams that ultimately did not win their final game. The top complementary sidekick to full-season per-game point differential, upon which I'll also lean quite heavily, is overall point differential in the tourney, which will underscore how dominant the top non-champs were in that cauldron before they met their ultimate demise. Since we're essentially only talking teams that went either 4-1 or 5-1 in the tourney, teams that were amazing but on one cruel day not quite amazing enough, point differential provides a more substantial delineation than does something like win-loss record. On a lesser level, the specific tourney round reached will also be considered along with other factors such as number of pre-tourney losses, the specific circumstances surrounding their demise, and strength of schedule. These ingredients help split the hairs that emerge when comparing teams soaring at such lofty heights. While some very worthy honorable mentions exist, we'll count down in reverse order the 5 greatest non-champions. To kick it off, we've got the 2024-25 Duke Blue Devils, who in over 56% of their games smacked around their opponent by at least 20. Their super-duper star is the precocious Cooper Flagg, one of the most hyped college players ever and just the 4th ever freshman to win National Player of the Year. Although even calling him a freshman belies his youth, as his accelerated path to Duke saw him play his first 11 college games as a 17-year-old fresh boy. Throughout the first 26 seasons of the 21st century, no team that resides outside Spokane, Washington can match their per-game point differential of plus 20.5. When the tourney rolls around, they cumulatively outscore their opposition by 91 points, the 5th highest all-time mark by a non-champ, and one that comfortably clears every other 21st century non-champ except '09 UConn. But they meet their demise in wicked fashion. After cruising all throughout their Final Four matchup with Houston, they hold a 14-point lead with just over 8 minutes left. They still hold a 7-point lead with 80 seconds left, but down the stretch at the worst possible time, a stew of missed free throws, turnovers, and one hell of a cold shooting stretch conspired to produce a collapse of epic proportions. On to number 4, and the team that did initially pop in my head when thinking of scintillating non-champs, we have those aforementioned 2014-15 Kentucky Wildcats. Led by the hyphen-heavy two-headed monster of Karl-Anthony Towns and Willie Cauley-Stein, with Devin Booker coming in hot off the bench, they're just the second team in 24 years to enter the tourney with an undefeated record. Boasting a point differential per game of plus 20.1, it's seemingly a foregone conclusion that they're going to complete the undefeated season, that they're going to render the tourney, one in which they ultimately post a point differential of plus 70, as a sort of Kentucky Invitational. Especially up through a Sweet 16 bloodbath over West Virginia, the first instance a team doubled up their opponent that deep into the tourney since the 1940 Hoosiers did so over Springfield College in the second ever tourney, one so primitive it started with the Elite Eight. They meet their demise in the Final Four after being in great position to win when, thanks to a 6-minute Wisconsin scoring drought, they hold a 4-point lead with 6.5 minutes to go. Then, unbelievably, with a couple minutes of overlap, Kentucky immediately responds with their own 6-minute scoring drought that dooms them. In a game rife with officiating controversy, I'd be remiss to not allude to the infamous egregious non-shot clock violation that ties the game with under 3 minutes to play and changes the complexion of the final stretch, which they can't overcome. Cracking the top 3 is the 2020-21 Gonzaga Bulldogs, who enter the tourney with 0 blemishes as they scored 21.3 more points per game than they allowed. Their tourney point differential of plus 83 is excellent, and despite not playing in a powerhouse conference, they still had a non-conference slate that was quite impressive, certainly more so than their neighboring dazzling seasons. 2 of their first 3 games are wins over eventual top 3 seeds in the tourney. Game 4 is an 11-point win over eventual 2-seed Iowa, and that kicks off an almost inconceivable streak of 27 consecutive 10-point wins that lasts through the Elite Eight. In their streak-busting Final Four matchup with UCLA, they still survive in advance on Jalen Suggs' astonishing bank from a mile away, becoming the first team to enter the title game with an undefeated record since the '79 Indiana State Larry Birds. Their demise occurs after a quick turnaround following their emotionally draining, overtime-requiring Final Four win. They come out completely gassed in the championship game against Baylor and fall behind 29-10 after 10 minutes. They're also thoroughly outclassed on the glass in a bitter 16-point loss. Down to what I feel is, in some order, the unequivocal top couple non-champions. For number 2, the data would lean toward the 1990-91 UNLV Runnin' Rebels. In their quest to repeat as champions, not only did coach Jerry Tarkanian's squad win each of their first 34 games, but an astounding 26 of their first 31 were 20-point blowouts. Even including champs, their season-long mark of plus 26.8 is over 2 points better than anyone since '72 UCLA. And in the tourney, they stand at a neat and nifty point differential of plus 69. This is a team who, up through the Elite Eight, played 40,800 second-half seconds of basketball, of which they trailed for 81 of them. But even more fascinating than that, one of their players is H. Waldman, the first person I've ever stumbled upon who's legitimately got a one-letter first name. But the journey for H and his multi-letter teammates hits the end of the road in the Final Four. Up by 5 with 2.5 minutes left, the Rebels are in the driver's seat late in their showdown with Duke, who seeks revenge after getting walloped by 30 in the previous year's title game. UNLV squanders that lead and finds themselves down 2 with seconds left, but still have a prime opportunity when the renowned Larry Johnson brings the ball up the court and could pull the trigger on an open 3. Though instead he dishes to the hot hand and his much better 3-point shooting teammate Anderson Hunt, who can't quite nail the off-balance game winner, which turns out the light on their sparkling run. Point guard Greg Anthony casts his vote for this experiment, and at the time I'd say he was absolutely correct. But 8 years later, things will change. Last but most certainly not least, we have the #1 college basketball team of all time for whom a championship would ultimately prove elusive, the 1998-99 Duke Blue Devils. Armed with a trio of future NBA stalwarts, they reach the championship game, which they enter with 25-point wins having constituted half their games and 20-point wins nearly 2/3. That helps produce a per-game point differential of plus 24.7, a figure that, going back to the 72 Bruins, trails only those 91 Rebels. They also unleash absolute hell in the tourney by scoring 123 more points than they allow, better than any other non-champ and 83 of the 86 champs here. And while they do drop a pre-tourney game, unlike 15 Kentucky, 21 Gonzaga, and 91 UNLV, said loss even provides an excuse to show you one of the wildest endings in the history of organized hoops. Tied with 3 seconds left against Cincinnati, the Bearcats' Ryan Fletcher, a high school quarterback, tosses a perfect downfield Hail Mary to Kenyon Martin, who deftly delivers a touch pass to Melvin Levitt for the go-ahead slam with 1 tick left. Shane Battier tries answering with his own miraculous Hail Mary that gets knocked right to a Dookie, who stunningly banks it in fractions of a second too late. That razor-thin loss is part of a relentlessly brutal schedule. Unlike 91 UNLV, who played in a weak conference and only really had one impressive pre-tourney win, 99 Duke competed in an ACC in which they twice played and twice beat eventual 2-seed Maryland, plus thrice played and thrice beat eventual 3-seed UNC. Then outside their conference, they played and beat eventual 1-seed Michigan State, 3-seed St. John's, and 3-seed Kentucky. Oh, also they have the second person I've ever stumbled upon with a one-letter first name, thanks to the unassailable logic of his father. The story associated with their demise is as simple as it is excruciating. A fantastic back-and-forth title bout against UConn comes down to the final seconds. Duke trails by 1 as guard Trajan Langdon looks to create a game-winning bucket, but Ricky Moore's suffocating defense forces a travel from which they cannot recover. I was a bit surprised before diving into this that a team who lost a regular season game would still emerge to produce what sure appears to be the best resume of a non-champion, perhaps even by a comfortable margin. They managed to overcome that loss on the back of their overall portrait of dominance, both all season in navigating as tough a schedule as there could be, and when isolating their March rampage that came down to the tourney's final possession. And even that November loss required Cincy pulling off the sublime before Duke's own sublime response just barely didn't count. Larry Johnson's 91 Rebels snagging a top 2 spot aligns with perception, though 21 Gonzaga is a lot closer in their rearview mirror than I'd have thought, especially given the strength of their top quartet of regular season wins. But the combination of 99 Duke's placement on both charts, combined with their schedule and the last-second nature of their demise, is a seemingly impossible labyrinth to topple for any challenger that comes up short of the ultimate prize. So while that season's championship that they coveted more than anything wound up slipping through their fingers, those 99 Blue Devils can take at least a bit of solace in knowing that they, over all the other legendary teams who came up just short, can still stand tallest. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting Secret Base. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to get access to even more and see your name included alongside all these other distinguished folks, subscribe to Secret Base on Patreon.